He gives you exactly what you are asking for. So it's very important to know who is Lord Shiva and how to worship him. So this is why the topic I have chosen is the topic of the position of Lord Shiva. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, we have the famous story of Aitreya Muni. Now Aitreya Muni was one of the Prajapatis, and being one of the Prajapatis, his job was to populate the earth. He was given the job of populating the earth, and for this purpose his wife Anusuya and he were asked to populate the earth with as many descendants of his as possible. Now Aitreya Muni was not satisfied just to populate the earth with other human beings. He also wanted that the children that he should have will be exceptional children. And in fact, Aitreya Muni had great aims. He wanted that the Supreme Lord himself should manifest in the womb of his wife. Therefore, Aitreya Muni decided that he shall perform great austerities, so that by the performance of these austerities, the Supreme Lord, being pleased with him, will enter into his wife's womb. Actually, it's a fact that anyone who wants to have children should be aware and should realize this point. And what is this point? This point is that we should not just conceive children like cats and dogs. If you want to conceive a good child, then one should not go about conceiving a child just like that. In fact, it is recommended in all the scriptures that one should perform austerities and one should engage in a life of devotion so that your consciousness is suitably altered. And when your consciousness is suitably altered, then the child that you conceive in the womb will be completely different from the child you would conceive in a different frame of mind. Therefore, since time immemorial, according to Vedic scriptures, people have engaged in austerities and devotions before they have come to the point of actually conceiving a child. And Aitreya Muni, to conceive the Supreme Lord in his wife's womb, he went to the beautiful valley known as Riksha, and there he performed tremendous austerities. He stood on the tips of his toes, in fact 1 foot, he stood on 1 foot on his toes with both hands raised in the air for years and years and years on end. And by standing there for years and years and years on end without moving, it was such a tremendous austerity, and it was not sufficient for him. Soon he stopped eating, he stopped drinking even water, and gradually by controlling his breath, Aitreya Muni even stopped breathing. So when he performed such tremendous austerities, what happened? From his head, actually flames started to emerge. Actually, it has been mentioned in the scriptures that when one performs austerity, one becomes tapodipita, that one becomes inflamed by performing austerities. Therefore, one who performs austerities without devotion is a dangerous person. Because since he is performing austerities and denying himself sense gratification, if he is upset even slightly, he flares up into a tremendous rage. So Aitreya Muni was performing austerities, but he was performing them with devotion. And as a result of these austerities, all the three came down. Brahma came, and Brahma came on the swan. Vishnu came, and Vishnu came on Garuda. And then Lord Shiva himself also came. And Lord Shiva came on the bull Nandi. So all three of them appeared before Aitreya Muni, and they told him that since you have prayed to us and asked that we incarnate in your womb, in your wife's womb, all of us shall incarnate in your wife's womb. And therefore his wife Anusuya gave birth to 3 children. The child who was an incarnation of Brahma became Soma, or the moon god. The child who was the incarnation of Shiva became Durvas Muni, the famous ascetic and sage. And the child who was the incarnation of Lord Vishnu became Dattatreya. So Dattatreya is also Vishnu Tattva. He is an incarnation of Lord Vishnu. So when we hear this story, all of us start wondering that since he prayed that the Supreme Lord should incarnate in his womb, and all three of them appeared, and all three of them incarnated in his womb, then who is supreme? Is Brahma, who is the creator, the supreme? Is Vishnu, who is the maintainer, supreme? Or is Shiva, the destroyer, is supreme because each of them have one function. Brahma is the creator who creates the universe. Vishnu is the maintainer who maintains the universe. And Shiva is the destroyer. Because the end of the millennium, Shiva actually appears and it destroys the universe. So who is supreme among them? The creator, the maintainer and the destroyer. And this question came up before none other than the great Bhrigu Muni. Bhrigu Muni was performing great austerities and also was performing great fire sacrifice. And every day, without fail, Bhrigu Muni, for years and years and years with great devotion, was performing yajna, he was performing havan. And he was pouring ghee and oblations into the fire to the Supreme Lord. One day, Narad Muni came down and Narad Muni met Bhrigu and told him that, my dear Bhrigu, every day you are offering these sacrifice to the Supreme Lord. You are offering ghee as oblations to the Supreme Lord. But have you ever thought or have you ever wondered whom you are offering this to? Is this going to Brahma? Is this going to Shiva? Or is this going to Vishnu? Which one of them is the recipient of all sacrifice? Shouldn't you know this? So Bhrigu said, yes, I should know who is the one I am offering sacrifice to. And Narad Muni suggested to him that the best way to find out is, why don't you visit their abode? Because if you visit their abode, then you will immediately come to know by their behavior with you whether they are the recipients of sacrifice or not. Because obviously you are offering to the Supreme Personality and the Supreme Personality is receiving all the sacrifice. Therefore, when you go and meet each of them, you will quickly recognize, because the one who has been receiving all sacrifice will receive you most kindly, most lovingly. So Bhrigu Muni agreed. And first of all, Bhrigu Muni went to Brahmalok. And when Bhrigu Muni went to Brahmalok, he went to meet Lord Brahma. Brahma is his father. So when he went to meet Brahma and he entered into Brahma's court, he found that Brahma was busily engaged in matters of administration. He was very busily engaged in the court. Why didn't you come? No problem. He was busily engaged in the court, and being engaged in the court, he did not even turn his head to acknowledge the presence of Bhrigu Muni. So Bhrigu Muni waited, and Bhrigu Muni waited, and Bhrigu Muni waited. And finally he got upset that how can this person be the Supreme Lord who has been receiving all the sacrifice that I have been performing? Because if he is genuinely the Supreme Lord who has been receiving all the sacrifice that I have been performing, then surely he would not treat me so neglectfully. He would embrace me. He would welcome me. He wouldn't treat me so neglectfully and make me wait. So Bhrigu Muni rudely interrupted Lord Brahma and started arguing with Lord Brahma and asked him that, why is it that you are making a learned Brahman like me wait in the court without even acknowledging my presence? Brahma in fact got most infuriated with Bhrigu Muni, and he started fighting with him and told him, who are you to ask me what I am doing? I will greet you when I feel fit. And in this rage, because of this fight with Bhrigu Muni also got upset, and Bhrigu Muni cursed Brahma. And he cursed Brahma and told Brahma that for treating me so rudely and so neglectfully, when I have come to your court, I give you this curse that you shall never be worshipped on the earth. You shall never be worshipped on the earth, that people will find it difficult to find even a single temple constructed to you on this earth. This is the curse that was given by Bhrigu Muni to Brahma. Then Bhrigu Muni, he went to the abode of Lord Shiva. And when he went to the abode of Lord Shiva, what did he find? He found that in the abode of Lord Shiva, Shiva was nowhere to be found. So Bhrigu Muni started looking for him. And he went from one room to the next room, to the third room, to the fourth room. And everywhere he went on calling Shiva's name and looking into all the antechambers. And finally he entered one room and he found that Lord Shiva was engaged in embracing his wife. He was engaged in embracing his wife. And naturally, when Shiva and Parvati were thus engaged, they were very much upset to find Bhrigu Muni just walking in unannounced. So Shiva turned at Bhrigu Muni and said, "What are you doing? Is this the way to behave? Without so much as knocking or saying, oh, by your leave, you just walk straight into the room when I am with my wife? Surely you should know better than this." So Bhrigu Muni was most upset. He realized, of course, that Lord Shiva was not the recipient of all sacrifice. So he turned to Lord Shiva and said that because I have come to your house and as a learned Brahman and the devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you should have shown some respect for me. Not only you don't show any respect for me, but instead you are engaged all the time in embracing your wife. So for this, I curse you. And what curse does he give Lord Shiva? He gives Shiva the curse that because you are engaged in embracing your wife, when I come to visit you, wherever you are worshipped on the earth, the most prominent part of your worship will be worship of your male generative organ, or it will be worship of the lingam. Therefore, you can see today, wherever you go to a Shiva temple, most prominent in the worship is the lingam. Finally, Bhrigu Muni went to the abode of Vishnu. And when he went to the abode of Vishnu, Vishnu had closed his eyes and he was in Yog Nidra. And he was lying down on Anantshesh. And Lakshmi Devi was pressing his legs. By now, poor Bhrigu Muni was all upset. And he just rushed into where he was. And without even bothering to say hello, seeing that Vishnu's eyes were closed, he went straight up to Vishnu and kicked him on his chest. Of course, he didn't realize that Vishnu's eyes need not be open. Vishnu can see with all the other parts of his body as well. And Vishnu was very much aware that he had come. But before Vishnu could greet him, Bhrigu Muni went and kicked him straight on his chest. So what did Vishnu do? Vishnu caught hold of his feet and pressed them against his chest and softly began to massage his feet. And he said, "My dear Bhrigu Muni, I am so sorry that my stone hard chest must have hurt your soft lotus feet. Please forgive me for the damage that my chest must have done to your feet. And to acknowledge this wonderful occasion when you have actually kicked me on my chest, I will always henceforth carry the impression of your foot on my chest." In fact, even till today, Lord Vishnu always carries his impression on his chest. Therefore, sometimes people ask that how do you differentiate a Vishnu Dut from Vishnu? One of the ways you differentiate a Vishnu Dut from Vishnu is the mark of Bhrigu Muni's foot is on Vishnu's chest. So, Bhrigu Muni was convinced. He realized that obviously this person is receiving all the sacrifice that I have been performing. Therefore, he is behaving so lovingly towards me. And no one but he must be the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But Lakshmi Devi, she could not bear to see this. Which wife can stand by and see her husband being kicked on the chest by somebody who's walked in? I'm talking about old-fashioned wives. Modern wives may kick him on the chest to wake him up. So, Lakshmi Devi was most upset. And she said, "How dare you come and you kick my husband on his chest? And you have the cheek and you have the nerve to do it right before my own eyes? While I am standing there, while I am sitting there and pressing my husband's feet, you come and kick him on the chest?" So this time it was Bhrigu Muni's turn to be cursed. And Lakshmi Devi cursed him. And she said that from today onwards, never ever again will I ever step into your house or the house of your descendants. Who are Bhrigu's descendants? Bhrigu's descendants are modern day Brahmanas. Therefore, you know now, after hearing the story, why there is hardly a single temple of Brahma where he is worshipped, because of Bhrigu Muni's curse. Therefore, you can hunt high and low and you will find it very difficult to find even a single temple of Brahma. You also know that when you go to a Shiva temple, why the most prominent part of the worship is a ling? Because Lord Shiva was engaged in embracing his wife when Bhrigu came there. Therefore, Bhrigu cursed him. that wherever you are worshipped, the most prominent part of your worship will be the worship of the ling. And also you know that as a result of Bhrigu Muni's discovery, now it is common knowledge today that Lord Vishnu is the supreme. Among the three, Lord Vishnu is the supreme. And also we know one more fact, that because of Lakshmi Devi's curse that she will never step into Bhrigu Muni's or the house of any of Bhrigu Muni's descendants, you know today why Lakshmi Devi never enters into the house of any Brahmana. In fact, if you find Lakshmi in the house of a Brahmana, then you can understand he is not a genuine Brahmana. Because the story tells you that Lakshmi will never step into the house of a genuine Brahmana. So if anyone has genuine Brahminical qualities, then Lakshmi Devi will stay outside. So this is a very simple test any of you can apply. So now, as a result of this story, this story is from the Brahman Purana. So you have understood that Vishnu is the supreme personality of Godhead. Sometimes people still find it difficult to understand why the maintainer should be supreme. Like my friend, he often tells me, I can understand creator being supreme because after all somebody has to create. I can understand the destroyer being supreme because destroyer, oh, he finishes off everything, therefore he is supreme. Nowadays everyone is brought up on this Rambo cult. The destroyer is supreme. So they feel that, oh, if he destroys, then he must be supreme. But why is it that the maintainer is supreme? Please think. If you think, you will understand why the maintainer is always supreme. Because anywhere in life, in anything in life, you will see it is very easy to start something. What do you want to start? You want to start a business? You want to start a career or an education? You want to start a marriage? You want to start a friendship? It's so easy to do it. It's very easy to do it. You can start it with no difficulty at all. You want to finish it? Even that is very easy. What do you want to finish? Your education? Fine, no problem. Finish your career? That's easier still. Want to destroy your marriage? Very simple. And if you want to destroy a friendship, simpler than anything else. So to create is not difficult and to destroy is easier than anything else. But to maintain, that is the most difficult thing. Whether you want to maintain your business or your career or your marriage or your friendship, that requires a great deal of effort and that requires the most difficulty. That has the most difficulty, because to create anyone can create, to destroy anyone can destroy, but to maintain anything is impossible unless you have Vishnu by your side. Therefore you should understand that the creator is Brahma. And who is Brahma? Actually Brahma, Shiva are also incarnations of God. They are known as the Guna avatars. They are known as Guna avatars. Brahma is the Guna avatar who looks after those people who are in the mode of passion. Vishnu looks after those who are in the mode of goodness. And Shiva looks after those who are in the mode of ignorance. In the Bhagavad Gita, 3 modes of material nature have been described. And these 3 modes of material nature, or these 3 gunas, are termed as Sattva gun, or the mode of goodness, Rajagun, or the mode of passion, and Tamagun, or the mode of ignorance. One who is in ignorance, he is constantly deluded. Because he is deluded, you find him engaging in all kinds of sinful activities. He is full of sinful activities. And these sinful activities, in addition to that, he becomes short of temper, he becomes angry, he becomes envious, and he is often violent. So also those who are in the mode of passion, they are always desirous of catching something more. They want to get something more and more and more. But the person who is in the mode of goodness, he is the most peaceful. And these 3 are being designed for people in different modes of material nature. For example, one who is in the mode of goodness is looked after by Lord Vishnu, Lord Krishna, the Supreme. One who is in the mode of passion is looked after by Lord Brahma. And Lord Shiva looks after those who are in the mode of ignorance. Please let us not imagine that any of these 3 are in the modes. They are not in the modes. They are all beyond the modes of material nature. Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, they're all beyond the modes of material nature. But their job is to look after those people in those particular modes. For example, you can see from their very form how they attract them. You can see the form of Lord Shiva. How does Lord Shiva look? Lord Shiva is dark in color. He's got matted hair on his head. He carries around his neck a garland of skulls. And not only he has a garland of skulls around his neck, but he also has snakes entwined around his neck. His body is also smeared with crematorium ash. This is the appearance of Lord Shiva. So, this appearance is specially designed to attract those people who are in the mode of ignorance. Whereas, look at the appearance of Lord Vishnu. Lord Vishnu, he is white in color, he has 4 arms, he carries a conch, he carries a disc, he carries a lotus flower, and in this way you can see he carries a club, and you can see in this appearance itself how beautiful and how attractive it is for those people who are in the mode of goodness. And in fact, Lord Shiva, in this mode of ignorance, he handles those people who would otherwise never approach God. Therefore, you will see that the people who approach Lord Shiva, they are usually people in the mode of ignorance. And there are many, many examples of those people in the mode of ignorance who approach Lord Shiva. And I am going to tell you some of the interesting stories of those people who approach Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva, let me tell you, is practically the same as Lord Vishnu. Although Lord Vishnu is supreme, there is very little difference between Lord Vishnu and Lord Shiva. Because Lord Shiva has practically all the qualities that Vishnu has. But there is a slight difference. What is that slight difference? In the Brahma Samhita it has been mentioned. It has been said that just like there is a difference between milk and curd. You see milk and you see curd. There is a difference between milk and curd. Yet, milk is curd. It is derived from milk. Both are the same, yet there is a difference. So also, Vishnu is the milk and Shiva is the curd. Both are the same substance, but there is a slight subtle difference in Lord Shiva. What is that subtle difference? That subtle difference is that Lord Shiva is in close contact with Durga, his wife. And his wife Durga is actually material nature personified. And because she is material nature personified and he is in intimate relationship with material nature, therefore that little bit of contact with material nature, although he is above the modes of material nature, that contact with material nature makes him slightly different from Lord Vishnu. Therefore Vishnu is considered superior to Lord Shiva. It is very, very difficult for people to understand this. And because of this, there has been battles and fights in India since probably time immemorial. There is a famous story of Ramanujacharya. And Ramanujacharya was invited for a debate on philosophy and religion by one of the famous kings who was a Shaivite. And before Ramanujacharya could go, to prevent him from going, some of his disciples held him back and they sent another man, an old man who looked exactly like Ramanujacharya. So when this old man reached the court, what did the Shaivite king do? He immediately caught hold of him, thinking that he was Ramanujacharya. He plucked out his eyes. Both his eyes were plucked out. He caught hold of his tongue and he cut his tongue off. So you can understand what is the kind of conflict that exists between the two. Because you can understand the mind of the Shaivite king was a mind that was in total ignorance. Therefore it is full of envy, anger, violence. And because of that he attacked this Vaishnava and he performed his activities. But actually Lord Shiva does not permit any of these things to occur. Lord Shiva is in fact Param Vaishnava. Lord Shiva by nature is the greatest devotee of Lord Vishnu. In the Padma Puran, there is a famous verse where his wife Parvati asked Lord Shiva that, my dear Lord, which is the best form of worship? And Lord Shiva, he answers her. He says, Aradhanam Sarvesham Vishnor Aradhanam Param. So, He is answering his wife and saying that of all forms of worship, that worship of Vishnu is considered to be the topmost form of worship. Therefore, it is recommended even by Lord Shiva himself that one should worship Lord Vishnu. But people prefer to worship Lord Shiva. As one friend of mine tells me, he told me that see, Lord Krishna is very intelligent, he is very chalak, and Lord Shiva, he is Bholanath. Therefore, one who is chalak will worship Bholanath, and one who is Bhola will worship Lord Krishna. This is because I am very intelligent, he said. I know whom to worship. Because Lord Shiva is Bholanath, you ask him anything and he gives you no problem. He is Ashutosh, he is easily pleased. And since he is easily pleased, one who is intelligent will worship him. Whereas one who is Bhola and doesn't know whom to worship, they will worship Lord Krishna. And Krishna, he makes a monkey out of all his followers. So I said, is that really so? He said, yes, there's no doubt about it. So I said, yes, it's a fact that if you worship Lord Shiva will give you exactly what you're asking for. And although Lord Shiva gives you exactly what you're asking for, what happens? Eventually, in the end, you will land up in problems. What kind of problems you land up with? You land up eventually in problems with Lord Krishna himself. Not only you land up in problems with Lord Krishna, but along the way, you also land Lord Shiva in problems. It may be difficult for you to understand that, but in fact there are many stories in the scriptures which describe just that. In fact, you will see that those people who worship Lord Shiva, they start off by saying Om Namah Shivaya. They chant Shiva's name. And how do they end up? They end up by saying Shivoham, Shivoham, Shivoham. That means I am Shiva, I am Shiva, I am Shiva. They start by saying Om Namah Shivaya and they land up by saying Shivoham. That means I am Shiva. And who is the best example of this? The best example of this was Ravan. So what did Ravan do? Ravan, he worshipped Lord Shiva. Because he worshipped Lord Shiva and Shiva is easily pleased, Shiva gave Ravan whatever he wanted. And Ravan, he had a city that was actually paved with gold. He had the strongest army. He had the most wonderful things in Lanka. And in fact, Ravan, he was going to construct a staircase that would take you to heaven. Has anyone heard the song? Stairway to Heaven? So, he was building a stairway to heaven so you could go to heaven without performing any sacrifice. So this was how great Ravan was. And Ravan, after getting all these boons from Shiva, what did he do? He actually wanted to take Parvati and enjoy her without Lord Shiva. This is the nature of the devotee of Lord Shiva. He starts by saying Om Namo Shivaya. So he wants to please Lord Shiva. And once he pleases Lord Shiva, he wants to become Shiva. This is exactly the attitude of Ravan mentality. Ravan, after getting everything that he wanted, Ravan in fact wanted to take Parvati also away so that he could enjoy Parvati. So this is actually called Ravan mentality. So what happens if you worship Lord Shiva without knowing how to worship him? You often land up in the position of Ravan. In fact, many modern day Ravans are simply the result of this kind of behavior. Because they want more and they want more and they want more. And Shiva, who is absolutely bhola, he says, yes, take more, take more, take more, take more, no problem. But as a result of fulfilling those desires, what happens? The person becomes more and more and more demonical. In fact, in the Bhagavad Gita, there is a verse to this effect. In the Bhagavad Gita, it is mentioned. Krishna says, Kama isteste hritagnyana prapadyante nya devata. Tam tam niyamamastaya prakritya niyata swaya. That those whose hearts are distorted by material desires, they worship the devatas. Of whom Lord Shiva is supreme, because Lord Shiva is Mahadev, he is the chief among all the devatas. And by the worship of Mahadev, they fulfill these material desires. But although they fulfill these material desires, what happens? They don't become better people. They become more demonic. They become greater and greater demons. And in fact, Lord Krishna says that if you worship me, even if you worship me with material desires, what happens? You don't become more demonic, you actually become more saintly. Sometimes you may say that, oh, I have material desires, and I heard this lecture where it says that Shiva fulfills all material desires, so let me worship him. But Krishna in fact says that even those desires that are fulfilled by the demigods, including Lord Shiva, Krishna says, Ma eva vihitan hitan, even these desires are fulfilled only by my permission. So in fact, even the desires fulfilled by Lord Shiva are fulfilled only by the permission of Lord Krishna. But one who worships Lord Krishna, he fulfills all his material desires. But in addition to fulfilling the material desires, what happens? He fulfills them in such a way there are no more material desires. The best example is that of Dhruv Maharaj. Dhruv Maharaj, he also had material desires. Just like Ravan had material desires, Dhruv also had material desires. But the difference was Ravan worshipped Shiva, and Dhruv, being under the guidance of Narad Muni, Dhruv worshipped Narayan, that is Krishna. So after worshipping Narayan Krishna, what happened? He worshipped him for a kingdom greater than Lord Brahma's. And when Narayan personally came down before him, Dhruv Maharaj immediately prostrated himself. And what did he say? He told Narayan, he says, I don't want what I was asking you for. Now that I have seen you, I am satisfied. Just see the beauty of the statement. He says, I was worshipping you for material desire. The actual verse is, Sthan abhilashi tapaso sthito aham tvam praptvan deva muni indra guyam kacham vichinvan api divyaratnam swamin kritharto asmi varam nayache. That my dear Lord, I was worshipping you for a position, Sthan abhilashi, for a position, a great king. But he says, I have achieved you who is not actually achieved even by the demigods, but like Indra or even by the Munis. And he says, Kachyam vichinvan api divyaratnam. I was looking for a broken piece of glass, but I have found a beautiful jewel. He says, now I don't want what I was praying to you for. I have seen you, that is sufficient in itself. So you see the difference. Whereas Ravan, by worshipping Shiva, he acquired material desires but was not satiated. He wanted more and more and more and became a demon. On the other hand, you have Dhruv Maharaj. And Dhruv Maharaj, he worshipped also for a material desire. But when Narayan appeared to give him material desire, he said, I don't want it. Of course, Narayan insisted that he should have it because he asked for it. But although he got what he wanted, he no longer wanted it because he was completely satisfied. Therefore, Lakshmi Devi, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, she prays. And what does Lakshmi Devi pray? Lakshmi Devi prays and she says, Satyam dishatya arthito arthito nrinam naiv arthado punar arthito yatha swayam bhajate anichatam. He says that yes, it is true that you do fulfill the desires of material desires of people who ask you, but although you fulfill these desires, you also simultaneously give them bhakti. Not only you fulfill these desires, but you also give them something that they have not asked for. You give them bhakti in addition to that. So that although your desire is fulfilled because you've got bhakti, there are no more desires. I always give this example. It's like having a skin disease. Material desire is like a skin disease. If you have an itch, you'll want to scratch it. So when you scratch it, you'll feel good. I have a terrific itch. And if you're prevented from scratching because of people around you, when you get the freedom to scratch, when you scratch, you'll feel, bliss, happiness, because you've scratched that itch. And that itch will go away. But will it go away for long? No. If it's an itch, it's an eczema, it will come back again, and it will come back with greater and greater intensity. And this time when you scratch it, the pleasure will be even greater. Because the greater the itch, the greater the satisfaction in scratching that itch. So you will feel, now I am really enjoying when I am scratching that itch. And what will happen? That itch will keep on increasing and your pleasure will keep on increasing. Until by continued scratching, it will become ulcerated, infected, and you will have severe pain. So also with material desire. With each fulfillment of material desire, there is more pleasure. But eventually it becomes painful. So what happens if you go to your friend and you tell him that, my dear friend, I have got an itch on my back, I have got some eczema on my back, will you please scratch me because I can't reach there? So what will your friend say? Sure, just stand there, my friend, I'll scratch it for you. Your friend will scratch your back. But suppose you go to a friend who's a skin specialist. Suppose your friend is a postgraduate doctor in skin, and you go to him and tell him, my dear friend, please scratch my back, I've got eczema there. So what will he say? He says, first let me see what you've got. And after he sees what you've got, he will say, oh, you've got eczema there. He says, yes, I know it, please scratch me. So will your friend scratch you? He'll say, no. He'll take an ointment and he'll put it on your back and he'll say, please put this ointment 3 times a day. And sure enough, your itch will go for once and for all. So in fact, Lord Krishna is like the skin specialist. You approach him with material desire, he will not scratch that material desire for you. Sure, he'll get rid of that itch, but he'll get rid of that itch in such a way that you won't have that itch ever again. But that is not the position with the other demigods. That is not the position with Lord Shiva. Their attitude is, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. And therefore Lord Shiva gets into lots and lots of problems. In fact, the most famous problem that he has got into is the position that he got into when he was approached by one of his great devotees. And one of his great devotees was known as Rikasur, also known as Bhasmasur, was wanting to please Lord Shiva by offering his flesh into the fire. So he started cutting off pieces of his flesh and offering it into the fire, calling upon Lord Shiva. And Lord Shiva ignored him, because Lord Shiva is used to such people in the mode of ignorance worshipping him in this way. And he continued to drop pieces of his flesh and finally decided, since Shiva is not answering me, I will now cut off my head and drop it in the fire. So he took his knife and was about to cut off his head and drop it in the fire, when at that moment Lord Shiva appeared and said, okay, that's enough, enough is enough. Don't hurt yourself anymore. You tell me what you want, I'll give it to you. I accept that you are my great devotee. So Vrikasur told him that, my dear Lord Shiva, I want this boon that my hand should have this power, that whoever's head that I place this hand on should become ash. So Shiva said, what a queer boon you're asking me for, that whoever you put your hand on to bless should become ash. Is that the boon that you want? He said, yes. He said, all right, such a simple boon, so be it, have that boon, that whoever's head you place your hand on will become ash. So Vrikasur said, thanks, do I have the boon now? So Shiva said, yes. Then he approached Shiva and said, now let me put my hand on your head. So Lord Shiva, of course, became highly nervous and started running away. And Vrikasur started pursuing Lord Shiva. And he pursued Lord Shiva so that he wanted to test this boon on Lord Shiva himself. So Lord Shiva was in great difficulty. So Lord Shiva is the greatest devotee of Lord Krishna. So he called out to Lord Krishna with great intensity and with great devotion. And when he called out to Lord Krishna with great intensity and great devotion, Lord Krishna heard him. And Lord Krishna saved him from this position. And there are actually 2 stories how he saved him from this position. And one of the stories, I think I'll tell you both the stories. So in the Srimad Bhagavatam it has been mentioned that Lord Krishna told Shiva not to worry. And he approached Vrikasur and told Vrikasur that, my dear Vrikasur, I believe that you have been given this great boon by Lord Shiva. So he says, yes, and this boon is that whoever's head I place my hand on, he will become ash. And I am looking for Lord Shiva to test it out on, but I can't find him. He seems to be hiding. So Lord Krishna was in the guise of a mendicant. He was not in the form of Lord Krishna. So in the guise of this mendicant, in the guise of this ascetic, in the guise of this sadhu, he tells him that, don't be a fool. Do you really believe everything that Lord Shiva tells you? You are a real fool if you believe everything that Lord Shiva tells you. Lord Shiva is making a fool out of you. He said, really? And he was completely overcome by Krishna's yoga maya. So he said, what should I do then? That if I am suspecting that Lord Shiva has tricked me, just simply put your hand on your head and you can see. So he put his hand on his head and immediately he became ash. and thereby Lord Shiva was saved. In the other story from one of the other Purans, what happened to Lord Shiva, Krishna approached him, and this time he approached him in the form of Mohini Murti. He approached him as the most beautiful woman ever existing. And Vrikasur, when he saw Mohini Murti, he forgot all about Lord Shiva. So he started running around Mohini Murti. So Mohini Murti said, yes, I will enjoy with you. But before I enjoy with you, you must also accompany me in the dance. So whatever activities or motions I make, you should also do. So Vrikasur joined her in dancing. So when she kept her hand like this, Vrikasur also kept his hand like this. When he kept his hand like this, Mohini Murti kept her hand like this, Vrikasur also kept his hand like this. So finally Mohini Murti, she placed her hand like this. And Vrikasur, he also put his hand like this and he became ash. So he is also known as Bhasmasur because he became ash. So one who actually worships Lord Shiva, as you see, becomes more and more demonical. You already seen this example of Ravan, and now this is the second example. The example that I gave is of Vrikasura Bhasmasura, who also became demonical, that he wanted to actually get rid of Lord Shiva. But sometimes people who become devotees of Lord Shiva, they don't turn against Shiva. They may remain his devotees. But what happens? They turn against Krishna. And the most important of these stories is the story of Banasur. Banasur had hundreds and hundreds of arms, and he was a great devotee of Lord Shiva. And with these hundreds of arms, he used to play the drum to please Lord Shiva. And Lord Shiva was very pleased with him and gave him the boon that nobody should be able to defeat him in open combat, in war. And Banasur was so happy with this boon that he went and complained to Lord Shiva and told him that now that I have become such a great warrior, there is nobody who can actually compete with me in warfare, therefore I am getting bored. So Lord Shiva said, alright, then don't worry, somebody will come who will equal you in combat. And in time to come, Banasur was pitched in battle against none other than Lord Krishna himself. Because what happened? Actually, Banasur had a beautiful daughter, and this beautiful daughter, she fell in love with Krishna's son. And falling in love, she kidnapped him and brought him to her palace and started living with him. And Banasur, on discovering this, kidnaps him and puts him behind bars. And Krishna comes with Balram and his army to free him. So when they come to free him, Banasur attacks him in battle. And Banasur, he requests Lord Shiva that, Lord Shiva, I have been your devotee for so long, why don't you join me in this battle against Krishna? And poor Lord Shiva, although he is the greatest devotee of Lord Vishnu, although he is the greatest devotee of Lord Krishna, even Lord Shiva is forced to fight on his side against Krishna himself. And if that is not sufficient, he is asked to bring along his whole army. In Shiva, he is surrounded by bhutas, pishachas, all these ghosts and ghouls and demons all come to fight on his side. And that is not enough. They say that no, you should bring your sons also. So we have along with him his two sons, Kartikeya and also Ganesh. Both Ganesh and Kartikeya, along with Lord Shiva, they are in battle on Banasur's side versus Lord Krishna. This is the battlefield that takes place. Very, very interesting battle. You should read about it in the Srimad Bhagavatam. To describe it in detail is beyond the scope of this lecture, because then this lecture would go on and on and on. So you must all read it originally in the Srimad Bhagavatam. But the result of this is that Shiva and his sons are defeated, Banasur is defeated, and Krishna with his Sudarshan Chakra chops off all Banasur's hands. And he is about to chop off Banasur's head when Shiva intervenes and asks that, since I have been your greatest devotee, the boon that I ask of you is that you spare Banasur. So in fact, this is exactly what is done. Banasur's life is spared. So you see that by becoming a devotee of Lord Shiva, either you turn against Lord Shiva, or in time to come, you also turn against Lord Krishna or Lord Vishnu. Therefore, one who is a devotee of Lord Shiva without knowing Lord Shiva's position is a person who is in great danger. But that does not mean that we should speak deprecatingly of Lord Shiva. Actually, Lord Shiva is not an ordinary entity. He is a Gun Avatar of Lord Krishna. He is an incarnation of Krishna. And he is an incarnation of Krishna specially meant for bringing people in Tamagun to the feet of Lord Krishna. In fact, those who have tried to mock Shiva have actually landed in serious problems and great difficulties. And prominent among them was the great Daksha. Daksha was the father-in-law of Lord Shiva. Daksha was the father-in-law of Lord Shiva. And he got into conflict with his son-in-law. And as a result of this conflict with the son-in-law, what happened? There was a battle, and eventually Daksha had the head of a goat. This is also another great story in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Just to show that one should never think that he can criticize Lord Shiva, because by criticizing Lord Shiva, what happens? One actually lands up in very awkward and unfortunate circumstances. There is also the example of Maharaj Chitraketu. Maharaj Chitraketu was a self-realized, God-realized devotee of Lord Krishna. And as a God-realized devotee of Lord Krishna, he was actually traveling in his airplane through space when he saw Lord Shiva sitting surrounded by all sadhus. And on Lord Shiva's lap was Parvati. So Chitraketu began to laugh. And he said, just see that normal human beings, to embrace their wives, they go and do it quietly, secretly, in the dark, privately. But here Lord Shiva is sitting in the midst of great sages and is embracing his wife in public. So he begins to laugh. So when he begins to laugh at Lord Shiva, although he is a pure devotee of God, he is not forgiven for this. Shiva's wife immediately looks at him and curses him. And she tells him that you shall now be born in a demonical womb. He tells him that you shall be born in a demonical womb, and he comes in his next birth as Vritasur, who actually battles against Indra and the other gods. But what does Chitraketu say? Chitraketu humbly accepts whatever curse is put on him. He doesn't try to curse back. He simply, neither does he ask for forgiveness, he simply accepts it. And the verse that he gives is one of the best verses in the Srimad Bhagavatam. He says, Narayana para sarve na kutasya bhivyati swarga apavarga narakeshva apitulya artha darshana. That for one who is a devotee of Narayan, whose mind is fixed on Narayan, for him, whether he is in hell, whether he is in heaven, or whether he is liberated, whether he is in a demigod's body or whether he is in a demon's body, it's all the same. Because his mind being fixed on the Lord, he is never affected by his surroundings. So we should be very careful not to criticize Lord Shiva. Although his devotees may not be of the best, Lord Shiva himself is actually an incarnation of Lord Krishna and is beyond the modes of material nature. He is beyond all the demigods, and he stands right next to Vishnu in position. Of course, there are people who might say that, well, I don't think I am demonical. Although I have heard this lecture, I don't think I am demonical, and I don't think I am like Banasur, and I am not like Ravan, and I am not like Bhasmasur. So I don't fit into any of these categories, but I have been worshipping Lord Shiva. So how dare this character, he say all these things and classify all devotees of Lord Shiva in this position? How rude and insulting of him to imagine that Lord Shiva doesn't have any devotees who are not pure at heart. Yes, Lord Shiva does have devotees who are pure at heart. But then, if Lord Shiva has devotees who are pure at heart, what does Lord Shiva do to them? Lord Shiva takes them by the hand and he leads them to Lord Vishnu. Just see the beauty of the statement. That Lord Shiva, when his devotees become pure, he takes them by the hand and he leads them to Lord Vishnu. The examples are there, many in the scripture. So I'll quote one from the scripture and I'll quote two from modern day life. From the scriptures, we have the example of Draupadi. Draupadi in her previous life was a great devotee of Lord Shiva. And she prayed to Lord Shiva for a husband. And she was eventually given, as a result of her prayer, the 5 Pandavas. But because by now she was pure, her desire being finally satisfied or promised by Lord Shiva, what did Lord Shiva do? Lord Shiva made her in the next life a direct associate of Lord Krishna, so that she could become completely transcendental to the modes of material nature and return home back to Godhead. This is the position with all devotees of Lord Shiva who worship Lord Shiva very seriously. And if they worship Lord Shiva purely, Lord Shiva actually takes them and introduces them to Lord Vishnu or Krishna. The example in recent days also, some of you from Gujarat may have heard of Narsi Mehta. Anyone here has heard of Narsi Mehta? So Narsi Mehta was a great devotee of Lord Shiva, and he went to the temple of Lord Shiva and he fasted there and he prayed there without sleeping or resting for 7 days and 7 nights. And after praying there for 7 days and 7 nights, Lord Shiva personally appeared to him. And Lord Shiva personally appearing for him, took him and introduced him to Krishna and said, this is the person that you should be worshipping. And in fact, Narsi Mehta's devotion to Lord Krishna is famous all over India. We also have from the south, in more recent past, the example of the great saint Shivanand Saraswati. Shivanand Saraswati was born in a Shaivite family. That means from childhood, from birth, he was worshipping Shiva as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He also preached and followed Advait philosophy. That means he taught that God was formless, impersonal. And he was given the name Shiv Ananda. That means one who finds pleasure in Shiva. So he was born in Shaivite family. Not only was born in Shaivite family, but also he taught impersonal philosophy and was also given the name Shivanand. That means one who takes pleasure in Shiva. But what happened to Shivanand? When Shivanand finally attained the final position of bliss, Krishna appeared before him. And Krishna appearing before Shivanand told him that I am the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Your duty is to worship me. And not only is it your duty to worship me, but he said furthermore, the way to worship me is by singing and chanting my holy names. Prominent among them is the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. So you see, Shivanand, born in a Shaivite family, taught impersonal philosophy and given the name Shivanand. Actually, when he realizes God, God appears to him in the form of Krishna. What a paradox. How is that? Because Krishna promises this in the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says, he says, Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma na sochati na kankshati sama sarveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktim labate param. That when you finally reach this transcendental position of Brahma Bhut, there is neither hankering, neither there is lamenting, and you see all living entities as equal, and you get supreme devotion to me, that is to Lord Krishna. So in fact, this is what happens to those devotees of Lord Shiva who are actually pure devotees of Lord Shiva. In fact, last time when my spiritual master Bhaktipad had come, we asked Bhaktipad, that Bhaktipad, we are all talking about one God. And we say that yes, it doesn't matter whether you chant the name of Allah or whether you chant the name of Jesus Christ, and everything is alright as long as you call the Supreme Lord, you can call him by any name. But then what about those who are worshipping Lord Shiva or the other demigods? What is their position? Should we encourage them to do that, or should we discourage them from doing that? So in fact, Bhaktipad said that yes, if they are worshipping other forms of God, that is the demigods. Actually, the worship of demigods is not recommended in Bhagavad Gita. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is very clear and unequivocal, and he is not at all ambiguous on this point. He says very clearly, he says, Yanti Deva Vrata Devan, Pitran Yanti Pitra Vrata, Bhutani Yanti Bhutejya, Yanti Madhya Jino Apimam. He says, those who worship the Devatas, they go to the planets of the Devatas. Those who worship the ancestors, they go to the planets of the ancestors. Those who worship the ghosts, they go to where the ghosts dwell. And those who worship me, they come to me. And if you go to the planets of any of these devtas or the demigods, what happens? Krishna also clarifies that. He says, Te tam bhuktva swargalokam vishalam shine punya martyalokam vishanti. After having enjoyed on their planets and having exhausted your pious credits, you return again into this world. But he says that Brahma Bhuvana Loka Punaravartino Arjuna. All these planets from Brahma Lok downwards, all these planets are places where you go and come back. But he says, Mam upetya tu kaunteya punar janmana vidyate. But if you come to me, Lord Krishna, then you don't have to return again into this material world. So, Bhaktipad said, yes, the Bhagavad Gita is unequivocal about that. Bhagavad Gita very clearly says that you should not worship any of the devatas or demigods. Because if you worship the demigods, you don't attain this final destination. But Bhaktipad said, please remember, it is how you worship that is more important than whom you worship. So Bhaktipad said that you should teach them to worship without material desire. You should teach them to worship without material desire. Doesn't matter if you're worshipping Shiva or you're worshipping any of the demigods. Remember that you should worship without material desire. As Bhaktipad told me, he says, you're a father, aren't you? I said, yes. So he said, if your son calls you by another name, will you answer him or you won't answer him? I said, well, if I know he's calling me, then I'll answer him. So he said, see, so also you think God is any different from you? He is actually the Supreme Father. And if he knows that you are calling him, even if you call him by the wrong name, even then he will answer you. But how to know that you are calling him? Worship him without material desire. So even if you worship the demigods without material desire, Krishna understands it is meant for him. In fact, he says that yepi anya devata bhakta yajante shraddhayanvita tepi mam eva kaunte yajante avidhi purvakam. That those who are worshipping the other devatas or demigods, that worship is meant for me alone, but it is offered without proper understanding. Therefore, worship Supreme Lord, Lord Krishna. It doesn't matter if you have material desires. It has been mentioned in Srimad Bhagavatam. Akamo sarvo kamo va moksha kamo udaradi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. That whether you have no desire, whether you are full of desire, or whether you have a desire for liberation, in all cases worship Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But if somehow or the other you cannot give up the worship of Lord Shiva or anybody else, what should you do? Then you worship them without material desire, or with a desire to actually worship Krishna. It's like, for example, the gopis. The gopis went to the temple of Durga, Katyayani, and they prayed to her that, oh, please see that we get Krishna as our husband. That's permissible. You can pray to Lord Shiva, you can pray to anybody, asking them for their help and guidance in coming closer to Lord Krishna. Or worship them without any material desire whatsoever. Because if you worship without material desire, then naturally Krishna will come and he will take you finally, rather whoever you are worshipping, Lord Shiva or whoever you are worshipping, will actually take you finally to the position of worshipping Lord Krishna. So, are there any questions on today's lecture? I think I've taken more than adequate time. Yes, are there any questions? Yes, one minute.
I'm a big worshipper of Shiva. Do you mean to tell me I should not worship?
Same question. As I pointed out, if you are a worshipper of Lord Shiva, you should worship Lord Shiva to help you to become closer to Lord Krishna. This is one thing you can do. Because Shiva is the greatest devotee of Lord Krishna, and he himself says that of all forms of worship, the best form of worship is the worship of Vishnu. Aradhanam sarvesham Vishnur aradhanam param. That of all forms of worship, the worship of Lord Vishnu is supreme. In fact, Lord Shiva himself will encourage you in the worship of Lord Krishna. And by praying to him, he can actually increase your faith in Lord Krishna. The second question, what did you ask? Yeah. So you certainly, there's no harm in worshipping Lord Shiva, but you should know how to worship. Or if you say that, no, I am not going to worship Lord Krishna at all, and I am not going to pray to Shiva to help me to approach Lord Krishna. Alright, even that is acceptable. You pray to Lord Shiva without material desire, and he himself, without your asking him, will take you to Lord Krishna. Yes.
You said there is an intimate association between Shiva and Durga. And because Durga has a material mode,
It's not material mode. She is
controlling the material things. But in Krishna consciousness, most of the devotees has told that when you worship Krishna, you are not to bother about materialist things, because Lakshmi is associated with Krishna and Lakshmi has to follow Krishna. So you don't worry about this thing, Lakshmi will come when you worship Krishna. So how, this is...
who has told you this?
Most of the people in this they say, because Lakshmi has to come, because Lakshmi is with the Krishna.
So his question is that it seems some people are encouraging him to worship Lord Krishna for material desire. Is that what you're saying?
Next question I will ask, but this is
Your question is that people are telling you that if you worship Lord Krishna, Lakshmi has to come. Yes, that's true. Actually, the fact is that if you want to worship Lord Krishna, then the way to worship Lord Krishna is simply worship him and automatically everything will follow. It has been said, Yatha taror mula nischanena triptayanti skando bhujopashaka prano paratya yatrendriyam sarvarnam achuteja. That just like if you water the root of a plant, the leaves, the flowers, the branches, fruits, everything will be satisfied. So also, if you worship Lord Krishna, everything will be satisfied and you will get everything. And if you worship Vishnu, that is Krishna, Lakshmi has to come with him. Actually, you know what happens? Every time we have this Diwali, particularly Diwali time, everybody has Lakshmi Puja. Especially in business houses, they have Lakshmi Puja, they worship Lakshmi. But you will see that they don't worship Narayan. They will do Lakshmi Puja, but there will be no worship of Narayan. Now just imagine, which self-respecting lady will enter the house without her husband? You are telling her, my dear lady, please come to my house, but keep your husband far away. So will any decent lady enter the house if you tell her, keep your husband away and you don't come? That is called Ravan mentality. Ravan wanted to do that. Ravan wanted to have Lakshmi, but he didn't want Ram. So what did he do? He went and kidnapped Sita and carried her away. He wanted to kidnap Lakshmi and carry her away. So this is the attitude of Ravan and the attitude of modern day Ravans also. If you want Sita or if you want Lakshmi, you must first invite Narayan, because if Narayan comes, automatically the wife is supposed to come. So actually the instruction is that you worship Narayan and you worship him and automatically Lakshmi will come. Therefore even on Diwali, you may do Lakshmi Puja, but don't forget to worship Narayan first. It's only by worship of Narayan that Lakshmi is pleased. So both these things must be done together.
And then again you say that if you are close to Krishna, he will take away everything from you. So it's completely he will take away everything because he will never leave the chance.
I think I already covered that in another lecture.
Yeah, so then
That Krishna says in the Srimad Bhagavatam that Yasyaham anugrinami harishya tadhanam shanai tato dhanam tejanti yasya swajana dukha dukhitam. That Krishna says that if I feel that someone is particularly dear to me and wealth in fact is coming between me and him, what do? I take away all his wealth. And when I take away all his wealth, all his friends, relatives, everybody deserts him. And then poor chap, he's got nobody to depend on, therefore he comes more and more closer to me. So her question is that I heard that Krishna takes away everything and here you're telling me that Lakshmi follows. So,
I just remember one word.
yeah,
Lokartichet Bharat Krishna Loko Nastri Sarvata.
you can translate for the audience.
Lokartichet Bharat Krishna Krishto Bhavati Sarvata. Krishto Pichet Bharat Krishna Loko Nastri Sarvata.
Maybe you like the mic.
Lokartichet Bharat Krishna Krishto Bhavati Sarvata. Krishto Pichet Bharat Krishna Loko Nastri Sarvata.
So you can speak to the audience.
Suppose for particular things you pray Krishna, you you are put to trouble. Your desire is not fulfilled. But even though you are in trouble and your desire is not fulfilled, even then you continue to pray Lord Krishna, then your desire will end. This is the meaning.
So it has been mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam, yes, that Krishna does take everything away from you. He takes everything away from you if it's an obstacle between you and him. Therefore, you must remember very clearly what is the definition of illusion or maya. In the Srimad Bhagavatam it has been mentioned. Rite artham yat pratiyeta na pratiyeta cha atmani. Yad vidyat atmanomayam yatha bhaso tatha tama. That everything that is not connected to me, consider that to be illusion or maya. So if your wealth is keeping you away from Lord Krishna, he will take it away from you. If your wife is keeping you away from Lord Krishna, he will take that away from you. If your child is keeping you away from Lord Krishna, he will take that away from you. But you don't have to be so foolish as to fear that Krishna will take everything away from you. If you use these things in Krishna's service, then no longer are they illusion. If you use your wealth in Krishna's service, if you use your wife in Krishna's service, if you use your child in Krishna's service, then automatically they cease to be illusion, they cease to be obstacles. And because they cease to be obstacles, there is no need for Krishna to take anything away from you. So in fact, that's another lecture altogether which I already, I think it's also on video, Material Desire and Krishna Consciousness, am I right?
Yeah.
So I think if you read that, if you see that video, you will get a better understanding. That yes, it is true that Krishna will take away what's an obstacle, but don't make it an obstacle. If you use it in Krishna's service, it doesn't become an obstacle, it actually becomes a help. Therefore, we are advised to spiritualize our lives, that there should be nothing material in our lives. Because whatever there is in our life, if it is material, we either lose it automatically or Krishna will take it away from us. Therefore, we should spiritualize it. If we spiritualize it, then it remains with us. Not just now, but forever. Any other questions?
But now, before attacking Lanka, he worshipped Shiva.
In fact, it has been said by Lord Krishna in the Srimad Bhagavatam that sadhavo hridayam mayam sadhunam hridayam to aham yad anyat tvame janati naham tebhyo managapi. Krishna says that in my heart there is no one but my devotee. In my devotee's heart there is nobody but me. And therefore he says that I am not independent. I am in fact dependent on my devotee just like my devotee is dependent on me. He says aham bhakta paradino. He ashwatantra eva dvija. Sadhuvir prashta hridayo. Bhaktair bhakta janapriya. He says I am not independent, I am dependent on my devotee. So in fact you see that what to speak of worshipping Lord Shiva, Krishna worships even the humblest of his devotees. You see in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna takes Sudama and he puts Sudama on his own bed. He asks his wife to fan Sudama and he actually washes Sudama's feet and he performs an artik to Sudama. Would that mean that Sudama is superior to Krishna? Yes? But because Sudama is worshipping Lord Krishna with great devotion and sincerity, therefore he is a devotee of Lord Krishna, he becomes dearer to Lord Krishna than anybody else. Therefore, actually, Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead, but although he is master of the universe, he is servant of his devotee. Although he is master of the universe, he is servant of his devotee. So in conclusion, I will tell you, when Ramayana was being shown, one episode was shown on TV, and that episode that was being shown on TV showed Lord Shiva offering prostrations to Lord Ram. So when this was shown on TV, in South India and Karnataka, there is a community known as Lingayats. So they got very upset. They said, all our life and our ancestors and we have been worshipping Shiva as supreme, and now on Ramayana, on nationwide telecast, they are showing Shiva offering respects to Lord Ram. So they put a stay order in the Supreme Court to prevent Ramayana from being shown on TV. So what happened? The learned judges of the land, a panel of judges, went through all the scriptures, went through the Vedic scriptures. And after studying the Vedic scriptures, they gave their learned judgment. And what was the learned judgment of the judges of the Supreme Court in India? After studying Vedic scriptures, their judgment was that Lord Ram, Vishnu, Krishna are supreme and Lord Shiva does not occupy the same position. Therefore, it is only correct that he should offer respects to Lord Ram. And therefore they vacated the stay order and they allowed Ramayana to be shown on TV. So finally, in conclusion, I'd like to tell you that if you have any friends who don't agree that Krishna is supreme, you can tell them, alright, even if you don't accept scripture, at least you must accept the verdict of the Supreme Court of India. Alright, thank you so much. So one more thing before of Atri Muni. You can see Atri Muni, he is standing on one foot. And he has been in the valley of Riksha praying to the Supreme Lord so that Supreme Lord will incarnate in the womb of his wife. So you can see here that here Krishna has come on Garuda, Shiva has come on Nandi, and Brahma on the right side four-headed has come on the swan. So this is the story I told you about Atri Muni. And this is Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva doing his Tandav Nritya. He is actually destroyer of the universe. And actually when this universe comes to an end, Lord Shiva performs his famous dance and he destroys or annihilates the universe. You can see him here doing just that. Actually Lord Shiva is Mahadev. He is actually the chief among the demigods. And here we see in a battle that occurred between the Asuras and the Devas, that the Asuras had the help of Maya Danava. And Maya Danava had a beautiful pool. And in this beautiful pool, it was a pool that was rejuvenating. Therefore, whenever the Asuras were hurt, maimed or dead, they would be put in this pool and they would become alive again. And actually Shiva, with the help of Brahma, come in the form of cow and calf and drink up this water completely. Also, this is the picture where Lord Shiva earns his name as Tripurari. Because Mahadanava also attacks the demigods and he attacks them from 3 hidden airplanes in the skies. And Lord Shiva with his bow, he actually shoots all these 3 airplanes from the skies which are invisible and hidden. Therefore Lord Shiva is known as Tripurari. Here we see Ravan. And Ravan is the example of the greatest devotee of Lord Shiva. There has been no greater devotee of Lord Shiva than Ravan. And you see here that he became such a great demon that finally Ram himself had to come to dispatch him. This is the story of Banasur. And you can see Banasur with his many arms. He played the drums to please Lord Shiva. And you can see here Lord Shiva dancing to the drums of Banasur. And being pleased with him, he gave him the boon that no one should equal him in combat. And Banasur had a beautiful daughter named Usha. And she, in her dream, she dreamt she was madly in love with a wonderful, handsome person. And when she woke up, she wanted to know who it was. So she called the great artist, Chitralekha. And this lady, she drew so many faces for her. And finally, when she drew the face that most closely resembled the dream that Usha had seen, she identified it as Aniruddha, the son of Lord Krishna. And therefore, by her mystic powers, this poor son of Lord Krishna was kidnapped. And when he woke up, he found that he was in a palace with a beautiful woman who was the daughter of Banasur. But of course, he rose to the occasion and he enjoyed himself with Banasur's daughter. And one day when it was discovered that he was in fact living secretly with Banasur's daughter, Banasur personally came and with his entire army they trapped him and they locked him up. And when Krishna came to hear of this, Krishna along with Balram and all the Yadavas, they all came and they attacked Banasur's fort. And this is in fact the famous battle that took place. You can see here that Banasur on one side, and also you can see Krishna in combat with Lord Shiva, and you can see there that Ganesh is also there, and so also you can also see in the picture Kartikeya. So all of them are in combat over here. And finally in the battle, Shiva reveals the Shiva Jvira that is seen on the top. That is the fiery weapon for annihilation of the universe. And Krishna, he reveals the Narayan Jvira, that is a weapon of extreme cold. And finally what happens is that Shiva is defeated and Krishna is about to kill Banasur with his Sudarshan Chakra. and cut off Banasur's hands. And then finally Shiva comes and he requests Lord Krishna that he should spare Banasur's life. Not only his life is spared, but also he asks for forgiveness, becomes a devotee of Lord Krishna, and gives his daughter happily in marriage to Krishna's son. This is the story of Banasur. These are actually the sages Nar and Narayan. And the great Nar and Narayan sages are supposed to be incarnations of Lord Krishna. And this Nar Narayan once had a wonderful battle with Lord Shiva. And in this battle also with Lord Shiva, it is Nar Narayan who are actually the incarnations of Vishnu who triumphed. Actually, when this Manthan takes place, Krishna appears in the form of Dhanvantri and he carries with him a pot of Amrit. So when he carries with him this pot of Amrit, everyone wants to drink this Amrit, which stands for immortality. And finally, Krishna comes in the form of Mohini Murti. And in the form of Mohini Murti, he convinces the Asuras that he will divide it properly. And how does he divide it? He gives it first to the demigods and sees that it is completely finished, so nothing is left for the Asuras except for Rahu. Rahu happens to drink it. But Krishna immediately sends the Sudarshan Chakra and cuts off Rahu's head from his body. So only the head of Rahu becomes affected by the Amrit, whereas his body is not. And finally, all the Devas are most happy that Krishna has managed to give them the Amrit. And in fact, Lord Shiva is so entranced when he hears the story of this, that Lord Shiva begs Lord Krishna that let me see your form as Mohini Murti. So Krishna actually warns him that no, don't try to see my form as Mohini Murti because even you will be deluded. But Shiva insists. And then, before Shiva's eyes, Krishna becomes Mohini Murti. And Lord Shiva, although Parvati is standing right next to him, he forgets all about Parvati, his wife, and starts running behind Mohini Murti. And Mohini Murti runs, and Lord Shiva runs behind her, eager to embrace her. And while racing to embrace Mohini Murti, actually he ejaculates while running. And the semen that falls on the earth, it has been said in the Srimad Bhagavatam, they form the gold and silver mines of this earth. In another story from the Purans, they actually conceive a child, and this child, who is the Vishnu Tattva, is now worshipped in South India as Ayyappa. Anyone knows about Ayyappa here? So Ayyappa is the product of the union between Lord Shiva and Lord Krishna, and he is also an incarnation of Krishna. He is a Vishnu Tattva. So that's why I wanted to show you Mohini Murti, because she has deluded even Lord Shiva. This is Chitraketu, and Chitraketu is travelling in an airship, and travelling in an airship he sees that Lord Shiva is speaking to all these renowned sages, and he has got his wife in embrace on his lap. So Chitraketu, he laughs that just see, he is talking to renunciates about God and philosophy, and actually he has got his wife embracing him on his lap. So Durga in fact gets annoyed and she curses Chitraketu that he should become a demon in his next birth. Of course, he is born in a demonical body, but he is still a devotee of God because his consciousness is unchangeable. So we should remember from this story that we should be very careful not to criticize Lord Shiva. Because no matter how great devotees we are, we should understand that Shiva is the supreme devotee of Lord Krishna. Therefore, we are always and can never become anywhere close to him. Therefore, this example is shown to you so that we should be careful not to criticize Lord Shiva. This is another example of Lord Shiva's wife Sati. You can see here that she immolates herself when her father Daksha refuses to acknowledge her and speaks insultingly about her husband. She is the original Sati. She actually immolates herself because her husband is insulted by her father. And as a result of this, there is a great battle between Shiva and his associates and the associates of Daksha. And eventually Daksha's head is cut off. And eventually when there is a compromise agreed on, Daksha gets a head back, but this time it's the head of a goat. So one should be very careful to understand that arguing with Lord Shiva or speaking evil of Lord Shiva, or criticizing him, is a very dangerous pastime, as I have shown you in the form of Chitraketu as well as Daksha. In fact, Durga, seen here, Kamsa is trying to kill the child and he tries to bang it against the wall and Durga appears. And Durga is none other than the Shakti. She is the incarnation of material nature. And she is also a subordinate to Lord Krishna. She is in fact his greatest servitor because she serves by controlling material nature. And she actually protects his devotees. You can see here that the great sage Jad Bharat is about to be sacrificed by some bandits before Kali. And Kali herself emerges from the statue and she cuts off the heads of all the bandits because they are about to sacrifice the devotee of Lord Krishna. So you can see here that Durga or Kali, a great devotee, is also like her husband, a great devotee of Lord Krishna and a great protector of his devotees. You can see here Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva is in this tract known as Ilavarta. There are no other males, only females. And he is constantly thinking of Lord Krishna. You can see Lord Shiva. He is actually the person who bears the Ganges on his head. Because when the Ganges agrees to come to earth, she is worried, who will bear the brunt of my fall? So Lord Shiva promises to bear the brunt of the fall. And why does he agree? Because how does the Ganges enter into the material world? It is said that when Vaman Devi crosses and puts his feet across the three worlds, the tip of his toe actually breaks open the covering between the material and spiritual worlds. And as a result of this break that is caused by Vaman Dev's toe, the Ganges washes his feet and enters into the earth. Therefore, Lord Shiva happily takes it on his head because he knows that the Ganges is none other than water that has come after washing the feet of the Lord. In fact, all of us should remember Lord Shiva because Lord Shiva is the greatest devotee. And how do we show that he is the greatest devotee? You can see here that there is a manthan, and in the manthan everyone wants the Amrit. Everyone wants all the wonderful things that come out, but nobody is willing to take the poison. Actually, it has been said that in Satyug, the Devas and the Asuras, they lived in different planetary systems. In Treta Yuga, they lived on different countries. Like Ram lived in Bharatvarsh and Ravan lived in Lanka. In Dwapar Yuga, what happened? They lived in the same land, like Krishna and Kamsa. And Krishna's devotees and Kamsa, they lived on the same planet, same land. But in Kali Yuga, what happens is that the Devas and the Asuras, they live in the same person. So in Kali Yuga, the Devas and the Asuras are within us. And when we are exposed to spiritual life, what happens? A manthan takes place. Where does the manthan take place? The manthan takes place within our own minds. Should I? Should I not? Should I? Should I not? Should I give up this? Should I not give up this? Should I take seriously to spiritual life? Should I not? So there is always a manthan. The Asuras within you are telling you to run away. The Devas within you are telling you this is something good, you should stay. And in this manthan, what happens? Sometimes poison comes to the surface. In fact, poison comes to the surface as a result of the manthan in your mind. And if, like Lord Shiva, you drink this poison, then you qualify for becoming a great devotee of Lord Krishna. But if you reject it, you will always remain as a fringy. You will remain on the fringe of the devotees. To be a great devotee, when manthan occurs in your mind, you should be willing to drink the poison. So finally, in conclusion, this is a famous picture of Lord Shiva offering obeisances to Vishnu. As I pointed out, that because of such a scene that was shown in Ramayana, a stay order was brought. But the opinion of the Supreme Court in the land is that yes, Lord Vishnu, Lord Krishna is supreme, and Lord Shiva, the great, is his greatest devotee. Thank you. To our Thursday class, which is a continuation of our course in the science of self-realization. We are going to do the topic deity worship. Actually, this is a very important topic. Why is it an important topic? Because deity worship is a very integral part of Bhakti Yoga. And Bhakti Yoga is a science. Now what do we mean by science? By science we mean that if you perform a particular experiment, you must get a result. That result will be the same regardless of your social, economic, cultural, linguistic background. It will be whether you are performing this experiment in Bombay, Tokyo, New York, Paris. Bhakti Yoga being a science means the result of the experiment will be the same whether you perform it here or in Vrindavan. This is the meaning of science. Science means you perform an experiment and you get reproducible results. Now, deity worship is an integral part of Bhakti Yoga. So, deity worship is also a science. So, if you understand the philosophy and the science behind deity worship, you can get reproducible results by performing Bhakti Yoga according to the scripture. In fact, nothing has been more misunderstood about Bhakti Yoga and nothing has been more misunderstood about this religion of ours than deity worship. In fact, if you go anywhere else in the world where there are other religions are predominant, the first criticism that they'll direct towards your religion is that, oh, you are a nation of idol worshippers. This is a common criticism that's leveled at our religion. They will tell you, you are a nation of idol worshippers. Why do you all worship the idol? And the unfortunate part is that most of us, although we are born and brought up in this religion, have no real answer for that. Because most of us are not trained in the philosophy of deity worship. Most of us are not trained in the philosophy of Murti worship. Therefore, we have no answer to that. When somebody tells us you are a nation of idol worshippers, how can you follow such a religion? We actually have no answer for it. So, this is why I am conducting this lecture, so that you get a proper, thorough grounding and philosophical understanding of what is the science of deity worship. First of all, before we begin an understanding of deity worship, we must begin the understanding of whether God is personal or is impersonal. Because everything begins from there. If you are convinced that God is only impersonal, then there is no question of deity. But so, to begin, we must understand whether God is personal or whether God is impersonal. Actually, by definition of God, I covered that in my first lecture on the course. The definition of God is that God by definition is cause of himself. He is Sarva Karana Karanam. He is the creator, he is the maintainer, he is the destroyer of this universe. And besides all these things, God is perfect and God is complete. Om Purnam Ada Purnam Idam Purnat Purnam Udachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam Eva Shishyate. That God is perfect and complete, and everything that comes from God is also perfect and complete. And because God contains everything within him, he is absolute, complete and perfect. Now, by this definition, nothing is impossible for God. Please understand this very important principle. Please come in. By this definition, nothing is impossible for God. If we say that God cannot do this, then we are not talking about God. Please understand what we mean by God. When we talk about God and we say God cannot do something, automatically we are excluding God from the conversation, because God by definition, being complete and perfect, nothing is impossible for God. So when we talk about God and when we say that God is only impersonal, he cannot be personal, then we are not talking about God. Why? Because we are saying he cannot be personal. So also when we talk about God and we say that God is only personal and he cannot be impersonal, again we are not talking about God. For God to be complete and perfect, he must contain everything within him. Therefore, he must have a personal aspect and he must have an impersonal aspect. Therefore, for God to be understood as he is, we should understand and accept that God has two aspects. He has got an impersonal aspect and he's got a personal aspect. And unless we understand that this personal aspect is a superior aspect of God, we cannot begin to understand the deity. In the Kathopanishad it has been mentioned that Indriyani para hayartha arthebhyascha para mana manasasta para buddhi buddhir atma mahan para. He says higher than your senses, are the sense objects. Because you see something beautiful, your eyes are pulled towards it. You hear something beautiful, your ears are pulled towards it. You touch something beautiful or you touch something attractive, you are pulled towards it. Therefore, he says, Indriyani para hiyartha. Higher than your senses are the sense objects because they have the ability to pull your senses towards them. Then he says that not only are the sense objects more powerful than the senses, but he says that the mind is more powerful than the sense objects. Arthebhyascha paramana, higher than the sense objects are the mind, because your mind can control your senses. Your mind can prevent your senses from running to an object which will not be beneficial for you. He says higher than the mind is the intelligence. And higher than the intelligence, says the Kathopanishad, Mahan para. Mahan means the Atma. The Jivatma is higher than your intelligence. In the next verse he says, Mahan para avyaktat. That means higher than the Jivatma is the Brahman, the avyakt, the unmanifest. The all-pervading unmanifest is higher than the Jivatma. And then he says, avyaktat purush para. Higher than the unmanifest is the person. Purush means person. Avyaktat purush para. Purush para sa kinchit. Sa kashta sa karap sa paragati. So he says higher than the person there is nobody. Everything stops over there. So we have to understand that the highest understanding of God is the person, Purush. And from Purush comes his energy or Brahman, which is avyakta. Therefore Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Brahmano hi pratishtaham. He says, I am the rest, I am the source of the Brahman. This is what Krishna clearly says. So you have to understand that God in his personal aspect is higher than his impersonal aspect because he is the source of the impersonal aspect. Further and beyond this, it is important to understand that this person, God, cannot be seen by us. It has been said that the definition of this Purush is that he is Adhok Saja. Adhok Saja means that God is beyond the material senses. You cannot see God with your eyes, you cannot hear him with the ears, you cannot smell him with your nose, you cannot taste him with your tongue, you cannot touch him with your hand. God is beyond the material senses by definition. He is Adhok Saja. So when God is Adhok Saja, how can we come into contact with God? How can we relate to God? Actually, God understands this difficulty of the living entity to be unable to relate with something that he cannot perceive with his senses. Therefore, God actually appears in this world millennium after millennium to make it easy for us to fix our minds on him. This brings us to the concept of avatar. Avatar means one who descends, one who comes into the earth. Now, Lord Krishna, he descends on this earth. And although he says in the Bhagavad Gita that he descends to establish religious principles, whenever there is rise in a religion, he comes to establish religious principles, destroy a religion, to destroy the miscreants, to give help to the saintly people, and to establish principles of religion. The main reason why God actually comes into the world is to enable you to fix your mind on him. Therefore, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, he says very clearly, he says that one who understands the transcendental nature of my appearance and its activities, when he leaves this material world, he no longer has to return again into this place of birth and death. Janma karma chame divyam evam yoveti tatvata tyaktva deham punarjanma naiti mameti swarjan. Krishna says, one who simply understands the transcendental nature of my appearance and my activities, when he comes back into this world, he does not again have to come into this world if he leaves his body understanding my transcendental nature and activities. This is a very important point. So God comes for this purpose. He comes for the purpose of giving us a name, a form and activities to remember and fix our minds on. And we should not imagine that his name and form are actually material names and forms. His name and his form are transcendental. In the Gopal Tapani Upanishad it has been mentioned that Om Satchidananda Rupaya Krishnaya Klishtakarine Namo Vedanta Vedaya Guruve Buddhi Sakshini. He's calling out to the Lord. He says, Satchid Ananda Rupaya. O Lord, whose body is composed of eternity, knowledge and bliss. So Krishna's body is not a human body like ours. It's a spiritual body composed of eternity, knowledge and bliss. And we see in the pastimes of Lord Krishna that when Mother Yashoda is looking into his mouth, thinking that Krishna has been eating mud, she finds that she is looking into the universe. And in the universe, she sees herself looking into Krishna's mouth. So although Krishna is standing right in front of her, when she is looking into his mouth, she is seeing the whole universe contained within his mouth. So God is simultaneously before her in this form, and simultaneously, while being before her in this form, is simultaneously pervading creation. That is the miracle of God's personal appearance. So the Lord appears, gives us his personal appearance for the sake of enabling us to fix our mind on him. Actually, in the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna asked Krishna. And Arjuna, he asked Krishna and he says that, oh Krishna, he says, Evam satata yukta ye bhajatam tvam paryupasate ye chapya avyaktam aksharam tesham ke yoga vittama. He says, who is better, who is superior? One who worships you in your form as Lord Krishna, or is the person who worships you in your impersonal, unmanifest form superior? Who is better? Tesham ke yoga vittama. Who is actually superior? One who is worshipping you in the form as Krishna, or is the person who is worshipping you in your impersonal absolute form superior? So Krishna, he answers him. And Krishna says, he says, Maya Veshya Manoyamam Nitya Yukta Upasate Shraddhaya Paryopetas Te Me Yuktatmo Mata. That one who worships me in this form as Lord Krishna, he is considered to be the superior of the two. He says that one who worships me in this form as Lord Krishna, he is considered to be superior to one who is worshipping me in my impersonal form. And why does he say that? He clarifies later on. And Krishna says to Arjuna, he says, Klesho diktaras tesham avyakta sakta chetasam avyakta hi gatir dukham dehavat viravapyate. That those whose minds are attached to the worship of the impersonal absolute have a path full of sorrow before them. Avyakta hi gatir dukham. Gatir means path, dukham means unhappy path. Why do they have an unhappy road ahead of them? Why is it difficult to worship God in his impersonal form? Because he says, you yourself have got a body. So you yourself are trapped within this body. It becomes very difficult to make progress by worshipping me in my unembodied form. Therefore, you should understand this. Try to worship me in my impersonal absolute form, they will find this path full of sorrow. It will be very difficult to make progress for those who are embodied. Because being embodied, how can you worship somebody in an impersonal, unmanifest form? It's very difficult. Therefore, the recommendation of Lord Krishna is that if you want to make quick, easy, rapid progress, then take advantage of the opportunity afforded by Lord Krishna. And that opportunity afforded by Lord Krishna is that he has come down on this earth 5,000 years ago and he has revealed his form to us. And this form of his is present all over the world. And simply by fixing our minds on this form, we can automatically fix our minds on God simultaneously, because his form is not different from him. His form is not a material form like ours. Therefore, by fixing our mind on his name, his form, his activities, immediately we can transcend the material world. So we should understand what we mean by deity. Because many times people are confused. What is idol? What is deity? What is image? And they use all these three words, mixing them up, not knowing what is image and what is deity and what is idol. First of all, an idol is something that is made according to the whim, fancy, and the imagination of the individual. This is the definition of an idol. An idol is something made out of the whim, fancy, and imagination of the individual which he worships as God. This is the meaning of idol. Therefore, that is idol worship. We also condemn idol worship. We are not worshippers of idols. Because the deity is not an idol. It is not made according to the imagination, whim, and fancy of any individual. The deity, in fact, has been made strictly according to Shastric principles. Actually, the form of Lord Krishna has been very, very clearly described in the scriptures. Venum kvanantam aravindalaya taksham bharavatam samasitam buddha sundarangam kandarpa koti kamaniya vishesha shobham govindamadi purusham damaham bhajami alola chandrakala sadvanamalya vamsi ratnangadam pranaya keli kala vilasham shamam tribhanga lalitam niyat prakasham govindamadi purusham damaham bhajami. That he has got a flute, Venum Kvanantam, Aravindam Dalayataksham, his eyes are like lotus petals. Bharavatamsam, he's got a peacock feather in his hair. Asitam Buddha Sundarangam, his color is that like a rain cloud. Alola Chandrakala Sadavan Malya Vamshi, not only he's got a moon locket around his neck, but he's also got that wonderful garland, Vaijanti Mala around his neck. Ratnangadam, his body is covered with jewels. Shamam Tribhanga Lalitam Niyat Prakasham. Not only is he dark blue in color, Shamam, but also he's got a classical three-curved form. This is the description of Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Of course, it goes on and on describing in detail. But not only has Lord Krishna's form been described in detail in the scriptures, but also there is what is known as Shilpa Shastra, which is actually clearly described how the deity of Krishna should be made. What should be the proportion of his hands and his legs? What should be the proportion of his limbs to his torso? How the deity should be made. That means the deity of the Lord is not made according to imagination. It is made according to description in the Shastra, and it is actually constructed exactly as the Shastra has described it. So this is not something made from one's imagination. That is one of the differences between idol and deity. The second thing is that the deity of the Lord is not an ordinary piece of wood or metal or stone. We should never imagine it to be such. Please come and sit down. I think now we should prevent anybody from coming in. The last entry. We have no place also, and okay. So it has been said, Archa Vishnu Shiladhir, that one who thinks that the deity of the Lord is made of stone, he's got a hellish mentality. Because not only is the form of the Lord made exactly according to the scripture, but the form of the Lord in the deity is not an ordinary form of the Lord. Actually, what happens at the installation of the deity is perhaps the key to understanding what is deity worship. Before the deity is installed, there is what is known as Prana Pratishtha. What is Prana Pratishtha? Usually, at the Prana Pratishtha, a saintly person who is in communion with God, he actually performs a sacrificial ceremony, where at this sacrificial ceremony, he prays to God, and in communion with Him, he requests Him to come and personally occupy this form of the Lord. So actually at this Pran Pratishtha, what happens is that the saintly person who is in communion with God, he actually personally requests the Lord to come and inhabit this form of the Lord with all His potencies. So you have to understand that it is not an ordinary statue. Even if you make a form of the Lord exactly as described in the scriptures, still it is not a deity. It requires the spiritual potency of a pure devotee of the Lord who in communion with the Lord actually personally requests the Lord to come down and invest all his potencies in that deity form. So this ceremony is known as Prana Pratishtha. And in this Prana Pratishtha, actually the deity is supposed to come to life. The deity actually comes to life. Therefore, it has actually been mentioned that the deity of the Lord is like an authorized post box. For example, if you write a letter, this letter of yours will go to the destination only if you post it properly. If you write a letter and instead of posting it in the post box, you discard it somewhere, or you leave it lying on the table, or you give it to your friend to post it who forgets all about it, it will never reach the destination. But if you take that letter and you put it in an authorized post box, then you can be sure that letter will reach the destination because it is authorized. So also, the deity of the Lord is considered to be an authorized post box. The deity of the Lord is considered to be an authorized post box. Whatever prayers you may make, they may or may not reach the Lord depending upon the sincerity and intensity of the prayers that you perform. But those prayers that you perform in front of the deity of the Lord, you can be sure that they will reach the Lord directly and immediately. Of course, nowadays we have courier service, which is faster than post. So, praying before the deity is like courier service. You pray before him, not even courier service, this is like fax. Direct communication with God. You don't have to wait because God is standing directly before you, immediately and automatically he receives the message. And you can be sure that this message will be reciprocated in course of time. In fact, this requires faith. In fact, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Ashradadhana Purusha, Dharmas Yasya Parantapa, Aprapya Mam Nivartante, Janma Mrityu Vartmani, Mrityu Sansara Vartmani. So Krishna says that one who has no faith, if he comes on this path, he falls away, and without attaining me, he comes again into the cycle of birth and death. So actually, God is immanent in all things. Actually, God is present in everything. He is present in everybody's hearts as Paramatma. He is present everywhere in his all-pervading energy as Brahman. And he is also present in his spiritual abode as Bhagwan. But he incarnates in the deity form to make himself available to you. This is known as Archa Vigraha. Archa Vigraha or Murti is also known as the deity incarnation of the Lord. So we have many incarnations, and one incarnation of the Lord is known as Archa Vigraha incarnation. That means the Lord has incarnated in this deity form. And because he is incarnated in this deity form, he becomes immediately available to you. Now, how he reciprocates to you is dependent entirely on what degree of intensity, love and faith you have for him. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Ye yatha mam prapadyante tam tathaiva bhajami aham. To the extent to which you surrender to me, to that extent I reward you. This is the statement of Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. To the extent to which you have faith in me, to the extent to which you surrender to me, to that extent I will reward you. This is Krishna's own statement in the Bhagavad Gita. And if you have 5% faith that Krishna is present before you in the deity, which is an authorized form, Krishna will manifest to you 5%. If you are 50% convinced that Krishna is manifested in the Archa Vigraha before you, he will respond to you 50%. And if you have 100% faith that Krishna has manifested before you in the deity form, he will manifest 100%. This is a very, very important thing. Because the degree of faith with which you see God in the incarnation of the Murti is the degree to which he responds to you. In fact, there is a very famous story of the great Tamil saint, one of the first Alvar, Thirupan Alvar. And Thirupan Alvar was at that time considered to be an untouchable. Because of perversion of the caste system, he was considered to be an untouchable and he was not allowed into the temple of the Lord. So not being allowed to come into the temple of the Lord or get a vision of the Archa Vigraha, Tirupan Alvar was not even crossing the river. On the other side of the river, he would stand, and facing the temple, he would pray to the deity, and he would recite great prayers to the Lord. He would recite great prayers to the deity of the Lord from across the river. So one day when he was in fact doing this throughout his life. In the last years of his life, when he was more than 80 years old, Tirupan Alvar was standing there in the river, and he was reciting great prayers to the deity in the temple. And he was standing with his eyes closed. He was completely lost in thoughts of the deity, although he was not being able to see it even once. And with this intensity of worship, he was standing there and praying. He was in complete samadhi, in complete communion with the deity. At that time, the head priest from the temple came to have his bath. And when he came to have his bath, and he approached the river exactly at the place where he wanted to have a bath, Tirupan Alvar was standing there. So, seeing him as an untouchable, he wanted him to move aside so that he could have his bath and go to the temple to worship the deity. So he tried to call out to him to tell him to move. But since he did not move, he did not want to touch him. So he picked up a small pebble and he threw it at Tirupan Alvar. And that stone hit Tirupan Alvar in the center of the forehead. And Tirupan Alvar immediately came out of his trance. And getting up, he offered his respects and moved away to let the head priest have his bath. Head priest's name was Lokasangra Muni. So when the Lokasangra Muni went back to the Srirangam temple, you know what he saw? He saw that from the center of the forehead of the deity, some fluid was coming down. So he went there and he tried to clean it, because that was his duty as a priest. And he saw that was blood. And to his horror, when he cleaned that blood from the forehead of the deity, that blood would not stop flowing. It continuously kept on trickling down from the forehead. The deity was a stone deity. But although the deity was a stone deity, blood kept continuously trickling down from that point in the forehead. So Lokasangra Muni was horrified. He didn't know what to do. Should he keep it a secret or should he tell other people? So he informed the king, and the king came there with his retinue, and it was recommended that great Vedic sacrifice should be conducted in front of the deity, and by performing great Vedic sacrifice in front of the deity, this blood will stop flowing. So for 3 days they performed great Vedic sacrifice, and still the blood kept on flowing. And every night in the sleep of Lokasangra Muni, the deity would come with blood coming from his forehead. And he would tell him that you can only stop this blood from flowing if you seek out this devotee of mine, if you seek out Tirupan Alvar and you carry him on your shoulders, not on your back, on your shoulders. If you carry him on your shoulders and you enter the temple and you bring him not just to the temple compound or in the temple, but you bring him into the sanctum sanctorum, the innermost chamber of the temple. So Lokasangra Muni was horrified by this dream. Because an untouchable, even if he touched him, he thought or imagined, because of this perversion of the caste system. In fact, next week I'll do caste system, so you will have a better understanding of what I'm telling you. He said, if I touch him, I'll lose my caste. And I am supposed to carry him on my shoulders. And such a person is not allowed into the temple compound. And I am supposed to carry him not only into the temple, but into the inner chamber of the temple, the sanctum sanctorum. So he didn't do anything the first day. Second day, third day, persistently the Lord appeared to him with blood coming from his forehead and told him, why aren't you doing it? So finally Lokasangra Muni, he had no choice. Because by now this blood coming from the forehead of the deity of the Lord became common knowledge, and every day hordes of thousands of people were coming to see this. And nobody understood why blood was coming from the forehead of the Lord. And by thousands people were coming from all over the kingdom to see this. So he realized that he had no choice but to go ahead. So he went there, he sought out Tirupan Alvar, and finding him, he carried him on his shoulders. And carrying him on his shoulders, he walked into the temple and into the innermost chamber right before the Lord. And the miraculous event that took place is that as he carried Thirupan Alvar into the sanctum sanctorum, Thirupan Alvar recited one of the most beautiful poems glorifying God. In fact, it is the only poem that we have Thirupan Alvar, because for 80 years all the prayers and poetry that he was reciting about God was lost because nobody heard him. But this was recited in front of everybody. So this was actually noted down. It's one of the most beautiful praises of the Lord in prayer. And while he was reciting these prayers, as he concluded reciting these prayers, there was no more Thirupan Alvar. Suddenly, Loka Sangra Muni found that his shoulders were light and there was nobody on his shoulder, and the blood coming from the forehead of the deity had stopped. So, in front of everybody else, you might always believe that the deity is made of stone, or deity is made of marble, or deity is made of metal. But depending upon the intensity of the prayer, depending upon the intensity of the faith, Lord manifests himself. And depending upon what degree of intensity you have, so also the Lord reciprocates. To the extent that you have faith in me, to that extent I reveal myself. The same thing has taken place further in South India also, at the temple, Sri Krishna temple at Udupi. Some of you must have been there. So in this temple, there was a deity of Lord Krishna established, installed by Madhvacharya. And this deity of Lord Krishna, again, could only be seen by those who could enter the temple. And who was allowed to enter the temple? Again, those who were untouchable or lower caste were not allowed to enter the temple. So there was a great devotee by the name of Kanak Das, who was a shepherd by birth, low caste person. And he wanted to see the deity of the Lord. So the priest told him, if you want to see the deity of the Lord, there's a window, a small window at the back of the temple. And from the back of the temple, through this small window, you can peep in and you can see the back of the deity. So Kanak Das did exactly this. He came to the window and, singing the glories of the Lord, he peeped in through that little window to see the back of the deity. And what do you think happened? In front of everybody, the whole deity of Lord Krishna turned 180 degrees. It turned 180 degrees so that he could see the deity of the Lord. In fact, even today, if you go to Udupi temple, you can make out from the construction that actually the deity was facing one way and now the deity has turned the other, because the sanctum sanctorum has been so designed, and that window has been preserved, and that window is called Kanak Das's window. And exactly opposite that window, they have constructed a statue of Kanak Das facing the deity of the Lord. And the custom is that before you go to the temple, just like Kanak Das, you should look through that window and see the deity of the Lord and then enter. So actually, as I said, why is this difficult to believe? Why you feel that the deity of the Lord cannot move? If the Lord can move the whole earth, if he can move the whole solar system, if he can move the whole universe and whole galaxies, why should the Lord not move a single deity of himself if you have that much faith? In fact, even Jesus Christ is said to have told his disciples that if you had so much faith as a mustard seed, you could move this mountain. So faith can move a mountain. What to speak of turning a deity of the Lord, that the Lord does himself out of love and devotion for his devotee. So also, in the city of Kanchipuram, there is another famous story of this another Alvar, Tirumalasi Alvar. He was such a devotee of the Lord that he would not leave the deity of the Lord. He was constantly seated at the lotus feet of the Lord. And the king, hearing about his saintly attributes and characteristics, he was very keen that this devotee should be brought to his court to enlighten him. So you know what Tirumalasi Alvar said? He says, I never leave the feet of my Lord, the deity. So if he wants to see me, he has to come here, see the deity and me simultaneously. There is no way I am going to leave the lotus feet of this Lord. So immediately the king was upset that how can this person not come when I have commanded him, when I am the king of the land? So he ordered his soldiers to go there and with weapons drive Tirumalasi Alvar out of Kanchipuram. So soldiers all went there. And with their weapons, they began to drive Tirumalasi Alvar from the temple. So when Tirumalasi Alvar got up and started walking away, the miracle that happened there was that the deity of the Lord was reclining. He was reclining. But the deity of the Lord got up. And not only the deity of the Lord got up, but the deity of the Lord got up and started following Tirumalasi Alvar out of the kingdom. And this was not a feat that was seen by one person or imagined by somebody in the dream. This was something that was seen by the whole city. So you can imagine this tremendous scene that the devotee of the Lord is getting up and is being driven out by the soldiers, and the deity of the Lord who was lying down has got up and is following him out in full view of the whole city. So when this happened, the messengers rushed to the king and told him about it. And the king was horrified that the Lord personally had got up and was leaving his kingdom. So immediately he called off his soldiers. Once again he requested Tirumalasi Alvar to go back to the temple. And once again the deity followed him back and took back his original position. So this is actually the miracle of the Lord. The miracle of the Lord is that he invests the deity with as much potency as you have faith. And don't imagine that these are cooked up stories. These are situations which were socially uncomfortable for the people in the temple. There was every reason for the people in the temple to cover up this incident because it showed their own foolishness. Because these events actually showed the foolishness of the priests of the temple, it was in their interest to cover up the incident. But even if they wanted to cover up the incident, which was socially embarrassing for them, they could not cover it up because it became common knowledge and all the people living around there either witnessed it, saw it, and therefore spread the story around. So you can see that the deity of the Lord, he actually manifests according to the faith that you have in the deity. This is a very, very important principle. In fact, there's another very famous story of Sakshi Gopal which I'd like to relate to you. And in this story of Sakshi Gopal, there are two Brahmanas who have gone for a pilgrimage to the holy places. And at Mathura, this old Brahmana who has come alone for his pilgrimage, he is helped and being looked after by a young Brahmana. So the old man is very happy with this young man who has been helping him throughout his pilgrimage. So he promises him that for all the kindness and all the devotion you have shown to me during this entire pilgrimage, I promise you that when I go back home, I will give my daughter in marriage to you. So the young Brahmana looked at him and said that please don't say something you don't mean. Because although we are both Brahmanas, you are very wealthy, you are born into an aristocratic family, you are very learned in the scripture. I am neither wealthy, neither am born in an aristocratic family, neither am I learned in the scripture. Therefore, even if you want to give your daughter to me, the rest of your family will raise so many objections that you will not be able to do so. So please don't promise your daughter to me. So he says, no. Not only do I promise my daughter to you, but I will take a vow in front of the deity of the Lord that I will do so. So he comes in front of the deity of the Lord and in front of the deity of Gopal, he promises him that he will give his daughter to him in marriage. Some time later, the young Brahmana goes to the older one's house to claim the daughter so that he can get married. When he reaches there, he finds that the situation is completely different. Because the old Brahmana's son, he fights with the father. He says, have you gone mad? Have you taken some intoxicant? Or has this man drugged you with datura that you should imagine that you will give my sister to this character in marriage? How could you even imagine such a thing? So for this foolishness, you are going to condemn your daughter to marrying this person? He says, better that you keep your mouth shut and I will get you out of this uncomfortable situation. So when the young one comes, he chases him away with sticks. With sticks they chase the young Brahmana away. And when the young Brahmana relates the story to all the villagers, the son of the older Brahmana comes and says, my father's money was stolen by this character. He has drugged him and he has promised him my sister's hand in a state of intoxication. Therefore, this promise cannot be fulfilled. So the young Brahmana thinks and he tells him, I have got only one proof. And that one proof is that the Lord Gopal, the deity of the Lord Gopal himself has been witness. Therefore, he is the one who has been present when this promise was made. He is my proof, he is my witness that it was made in good faith. So the older Brahmana's son, he tells him, well, if Gopal is your witness and Gopal himself comes here and tells me that he has been witness, then no problem, I'll give my sister to you. Otherwise, forget the whole idea. So this puts him in a very awkward position. So he goes back to the place of pilgrimage. He goes back to the deity of Gopal and he prays to him with great sincerity and great devotion. And he tells him, oh Lord, it's not that I am very keen on marrying his daughter, but you should understand that he has made a promise in front of you. So at least for his own good, to salvage his own spiritual welfare, I should marry his daughter because he's made this promise in front of you. I don't want her for myself, but at least to save his honor, I want to take the daughter. So, oh Lord, why don't you do me this favor? You come with me. And if you come with me and you bear witness that yes, the promise was made in front of me, then I will surely be able to marry her and all the problems will be settled. So Sakshi, that Gopal, the deity of Gopal who is standing there before him, he talks to the devotee and he tells him, really I would like to help you. I would like to personally come and bear witness. But although I would like to come personally and bear witness, do you think that this thing is possible? Have you ever heard of a deity of the Lord who has walked from one place to the other? So the devotee, he looks at the deity of Gopal and tells him that yes, he looks at the deity of Gopal and tells him, yes, it is true that no one has ever heard of a deity of the Lord actually walking. But then, you are not simply a stone statue, you are actually the son of Nanda Maharaj himself. You are the Lord himself. Because, have you ever heard of a stone statue speaking to anyone? If you can speak to me, then there is no reason that you cannot walk behind me. So you please walk with me and you bear witness. So finally Gopal agrees. And Gopal walks with this devotee all that distance right up to his village, and personally he bears witness for him, much to the surprise, astonishment and perhaps horror of the people who are trying to deny him this girl in marriage. And when this actually occurs, the deity is formally installed there and remains there as Sakshi Gopal. Of course, the temple of Sakshi Gopal has been moved from there now. But the temple is still standing, and those of you who have the opportunity to go and see this temple of Sakshi Gopal will be able to see the original Gopal who actually, for the love of his devotee, walked hundreds of miles just to bear witness. So these are actually actual living examples and living stories of the Lord who has personally manifested in the deity form. Because the people who worshipped him, they had that faith. Actually, that young devotee, as he said, he was not born in an aristocratic family, he was not wealthy, he was not learned in the scripture. But although he had none of these attributes, he had one actual plus point in his favor. He had faith in the deity of the Lord. And because he had this faith in the deity of the Lord actually manifested before him. In fact, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, also in the Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu, it has been mentioned that worshipping the deity of the Lord is one of the most potent processes in devotional service. Also in the Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu, it has been mentioned that if you are still attached to your friends, if you are still attached to society, if you are still attached to all the worldly things, then don't look at the form of the Lord who is standing by the bank of the river Jamuna. Because if you see the form of the Lord, automatically you lose your attraction for everything in the world. And the purport of this verse is just this. The purport of this verse is that if you actually begin service to the deity of the Lord, the process of deity worship will actually rid you of all the attractions of the world. And therefore, it is a method recommended for everybody, especially for those who are living in Grihastha life. Because if you are a brahmachari, or you are a vanaprasth, or you are a sannyasi, you are engaged in serving the Lord. You are engaged in serving the Lord full time. But the Grihastha, he goes to work. He works in his office, he works in his business, he works in his profession. Therefore, in Grihastha life, it is very easy to get entrapped in material nature. Therefore, it is recommended that for one who is in Grihastha life, the deity of the Lord is a very potent means to prevent one from being attached to the material world. So, in fact, it is recommended that everyone who is serious about spiritual life should accept a spiritual master. And this spiritual master should personally conduct a pran pratishtha for his disciple. That is, he should take the deity of the Lord and praying to God, he should request the Lord to actually personally inhabit this deity of the Lord so that his disciple, by worshipping this deity, will make spiritual advancement. And this deity of the Lord should be actually worshipped in the house exactly as if he is God himself. He should become the center of the household. Whatever you earn should be first offered to him. Whatever good things are brought into the house should be first offered to him. And he should be treated like any other living person in the house. He should be awakened in the morning. He should be bathed. He should be cleaned. He should be dressed. He should be worshipped. And arti should be offered to him. And your life should gradually begin to center around him. Not only that, it has been recommended that this worship of the deity should be performed by yourself. It should not be performed by a paid person. Like you should not hire a brahmana to worship the deity of the Lord. Because you should ask your spiritual master to install the deity of the Lord, and you should worship the deity of the Lord yourself. And by beginning to serve him and engaging in service of him, by cleaning him, wiping him, bathing him, feeding him, putting him to rest, waking him up, you will establish a very intimate relationship with him. And in fact, throughout the day, you will remember the Lord whom you have served in the morning, whom you are serving in the evening, and whom your wife will be serving through the day. And in this way, your mind will become fixed on God. So, in fact, the worship of the deity is one of the most potent processes in devotional service, and it is recommended especially for all grihasthas. Either you sit down or you go out. One of the two. Go in. But don't make a mockery out of it. Don't make a mockery out of the deity of the Lord. I have seen so many people who actually keep the deity of the Lord at home and then make a mockery out of it. हाँ, हमारे घर पे ठाकुर जी हैं. But they have actually made a mockery out of it. I remember I went to one gentleman's house. So he was showing me what a beautiful house he had. And he was showing me, this is my bedroom, this is my first son's bedroom, this is my second son's bedroom, this is where my grandchildren sleep, this is our kitchen, this is a drawing room, this is a recreation room, this is the living room. So I said, but I came to your house to see Thakurji, where is he? He said, here he is, and he pulled him out of a drawer. So such a big house. And so much place for everybody, but God, he has put him in a tiny little drawer. So this is the place that people give to God in their lives. Very small place for God. Big place for everybody. But this is not the way to look after the deity of the house. The deity of the Lord forms the central position in the house. Everything in the house actually revolves around him. The house belongs to him, and every moment in the house you are made aware of the fact that the deity is master of the house. This is a very important principle, that it should not be made into a mockery. You should understand that that deity is the Lord of the house. You are his servant. You are not the master of the house. You are simply the servant of the Lord who is there in the form of the deity. And actually, people take so much trouble over their children. Arey, my son, he's not had his breakfast and he's running to school. No, no, come back, son. They'll follow him to the bus stop and they'll start pushing food into his mouth before he gets onto the school bus. But the deity of the Lord, oh, I forgot to make the morning offering. No problem, I'll make it in the afternoon. So this is actually an idea that, oh, they have installed the deity of the Lord, but they have no faith. They think, oh, this is just another statue. So if this is another statue, then what's the need? I missed the morning offering. ठीक है, no problem. देखा जाएगा. They don't understand that the Lord should be treated with more respect, more love, more devotion than even your own child. And if they go for holiday, what do they do when they go for holiday? They take Thakurji or they take the deity of the Lord, put a cloth over him, wrap him up, put him in a trunk, lock it up and go away. Same people, if they've got a dog in the house, oh, and they have to go out for a holiday, they are very worried. Who will feed the dog? Who will take the dog down? Who will exercise the dog? And they will come to their neighbors and they will request their neighbors that please, we are going out for a holiday, we are going to Uta command for a holiday. Why don't you look after our dog? Why don't you feed our dog? Why don't you exercise our dog? Why don't you take our dog down? But when it comes to the deity of the Lord, that is different. Therefore, I always say that for your DOG you can do so much, but for GOD you are willing to do nothing. This is actually in Kali Yuga, it's like this. Therefore, although I am talking about deity worship, I want to make it very clear that don't take this cheaply. Don't take this cheaply. When the deity of the Lord enters your house, he is actually the Lord himself. Therefore, he must be treated exactly as you treat the Lord. That is, if you want him to establish a relationship with you, you must do this. Otherwise, do not accept the deity in your house. Better you go to a place where deity is worshipped and you see the deity of the Lord being worshipped. Because it has been mentioned in the scripture that it is so important for the Grihastha to worship the deity that if he cannot worship the deity himself in his house, then it is actually necessary for him to go to a place where the deity is worshipped and see the deity worship being performed. This is an essential part of devotional service. If you can't do it yourself at home, then you should go to a place where it is performed. And it is mentioned that if you find it impossible to go to a place where it is performed, then it is said in the scripture that you should perform this worship of the deity in your mind. If you can't perform it physically in the home, if you can't even go to the temple and see it being performed, or to somebody else's house and see it being performed, then better you do it in your mind, but don't give up worship of the deity. Because how else will you remember the form of the Lord? How else will you establish a relationship with the Lord if you do not serve him? In fact, in the Brahma Vaivarta Puran, there is a very famous story of a Brahmana in Pratishtanapur. And this Brahmana in Pratishtanapur, he was a very poor Brahmana. He lived under a tree. He had no money whatsoever. And he lived in a place that was so far from every temple that there was no possibility of him going to even see the worship of the Lord in the deity form. So somebody told him, that doesn't matter, you worship the Lord in your mind. So this Brahmana thought that, well, certainly this is a very good idea, because if I try to do it physically, I am restricted, but if I worship the Lord in my mind, there is no limit to the opulence of my worship. So, every day in the mind, he would offer deity worship to his deity. What would he do? He would begin by waking him up. Then